Oya, Sakuya Nade. This is HK7335 welcoming you to another video. This time we're discussing slicing strategies for the LL-99 blaster model that I just put up. If you purchased this model, then this video is for you, especially if you're new to 3D printing and you're not quite sure what the best way to print some of these complicated parts might be. It's not quite as obvious as you would think it. So I have the four most challenging parts laid out here in Orca, each one on their own plate, so we can kind of keep everything separated and be able to see it clearly. So the first one here is the receiver. I think this is probably the most challenging part because it's got so many little surfaces that project out from the center that can be very challenging. Then we have the barrel, we have the barrel shroud, and finally we have the trigger guard. So we're going to go ahead and start with the receiver, and we'll talk about my strategy for that. So initially you may think, well, we can just put this thing straight up and down, and actually in Orca or Cura and some of these other places, the best way to do that would be to just use the lay on face tool, and that does work. The problem here is that even though you can get this supported, you'll need supports here, you're going to need supports probably up here, you're going to need supports around this ring, you're definitely going to need supports probably in some of these other places. This would probably bridge, and you'll need supports all the way around here on this particular ring. But the main problem is not so much the supports, but the fact that as this thing gets taller, it's going to become very heavy. And really the only place where it's making good contact with the bed is this surface right here. Now, you could use a raft, and that would definitely help, but it's going to become pretty unwieldy as it gets near the top. And there's nothing more painful than having a print get 90-95% of the way and then suddenly fail because it fell over. So to avoid that, I like to rotate my parts, about 30 degrees. So what I'm looking to do is create sort of a 30, 60, 90 triangle of support back here. Now you could go more, but I think keeping it as close to vertical as you possibly can and still get some good bracing is more optimal. And this is the solution that I've come up with that I think works. It actually works really well. So we're going to go in here and we're going to paint some supports on here. We'll go ahead and highlight some overhangs. Let's see what we get. I like to go about there, and that looks pretty good. So we'll say we only want to paint on overhangs. So we'll start here, and we'll do that. Let's see what else. We got this right here. I only want to paint a little bit of this, about that much of it, and a little bit of this. And we'll also get this right here. We're switching back to the paint bucket. This, if I go here, okay, that's good. I like that. And I like that. I actually like that too. So we'll go ahead and take that, and we'll take that, and we'll grab this, and this, and this, and I think we'll probably take that too. That's good. That actually looks really good. There's one more area that I want to hit, and I'm going to do that with the paintbrush, and that is just this little area right in here. Because this is an arc, it may need some supports. It's not really going to bridge very well because it's an arc, so we're going to just go ahead and help it out by painting that in. So I'm not using any blockers. I'm just basically telling it where I want supports, and that should be good. All these now, see, what's great about this is that we're keeping the supports in areas that are ultimately going to be covered up. This is where the barrel attaches, so that's going to be completely covered. This is where the trigger guard attaches, so that's going to be totally covered up. and any supports we put in here are going to be hidden. You know, whatever surface is left behind from them is going to be hidden by the trigger box that goes in there. All these other surfaces will print just fine without supports, which is great because, you know, that's enough sanding as it is, even with the print looking clean. So we don't want to mess those surfaces up by putting supports on them. So we're going to say OK to that by just clicking back on the Move tool, and that's that. So that actually will have a good chance that we slice the plate, we can see what we get. And while that's cooking, we will show off what kind of support settings we're using. We're using snug supports, which you'll see they don't project out from the side of the part. They pretty much stay very well in the areas that were defined by the paintbrush. They don't really go out of that. We don't have areas like overhanging and encroaching into other parts of the model where we don't want to see supports, which can definitely happen when you're not using snug supports. So that's what I'm using here. Normal distance settings on the Z, 0.26. Sometimes I will go as high as 0.33, but nothing from the raft is touching the model, so we should be okay there. Alright, so there's that, and as you can see, we've got great bracing. The only area where we might have an issue, actually we probably won't though because of the density here, but generally I like to try to keep my supports contiguous, in other words connected all the way along. That wasn't really possible here. In order to get that, we would have had to put supports all the way along this particular surface here, and I just didn't want to do that because I think that would have been very messy. But because this is so dense right here, I think we'll have no issues with this printing and going up along the Z without collapsing. And of course, once it gets to here and is making contact with the model, then we're going to be home free. So it should print very successfully, and as you can see by the way the print lines are running, this should actually look really good. You know, you're getting a little bit of stair stepping in here, but overall these surfaces are going to be a lot easier to deal with in a post-processing sense than they would be if we had this printed straight up and down, or if we had it laying, you know, along the floor and was supporting it this way. I think that one's good. That's the receiver. So let's go ahead and look at the barrel. Now again, here's an idea where you could think that putting it, you know, like this would be the way to go. And, you know, because of the amount of surface area that's making contact with this, that may not be a bad idea. But again, we do have the risk of it toppling over as it gets closer to the top just because of kinetic forces. And it doesn't have a lot of surface area making contact with the bed. So we would have to really have our bed adhesion dialed in and perfect, and in my experience it almost never is unless you're in a completely controlled environment. I am not. My temperatures internally in the house fluctuate quite a bit, especially during the winter. If you have a door open even for a minute, it can drop the temperature a few degrees, and that can make a difference on how everything functions. The bed leveling can actually change just a little bit under those conditions. So we want to minimize the potential for failure by optimizing the position of this part, because the place that I want to put the supports is in this area right here. This is going to be where the trigger guard sits, and we won't see that surface, so putting supports there is ideal. First I want to make it though so that it is facing the back. Okay, and it is. I wonder if it always was. I don't know. Okay, that looks good right there. So now we're going to go ahead and do support painting, and we're going to get some overhangs. Okay, cool. So we're going to go ahead and hit this right here, and we're going to hit this. This, I don't know if we actually need to support that. I don't think we do. I think when I printed this before, I realized that probably didn't need a support there. I will support that, and I'm going to want to support. Let's see, I got an area right here. You know, and it seems like it's going to be a lot of supports, but ultimately it's really not, because you're getting this whole huge area of the model that isn't going to have any supports on it, and it's all parts of the model that are going to be visible when you put it together. So these surfaces are going to be as high quality as they can possibly be when it comes off the print bed based on your settings. So let's turn this off so we can get in here, because yeah, I do want to fill that whole thing up with supports. That's going to give it a lot of stability. When we slice it, it's going to have a lot of stability, and that's what we want. So let's go ahead and slice it and see what we got. Yeah, that's perfect. So you can see it's got, you know, it's very well braced against the movement of the bed along the y-axis. It's not going to go anywhere. It's not going to have any risk of toppling over. It's going to be very good quality print. This will bridge in here just fine, and nothing else on this needs to be supported. So let's go and look at an even more challenging print. Or is it? So this is the barrel shroud. So the only question here is, which end do you want to be the bottom? And ultimately, I think that this one, I'm going to go ahead and just tell it to lay on face right now, so we can kind of look at this. If we were to use this side isn't bad. We'd have supports along here. We'd have supports in here. But I still feel like this end is probably better. Now this one's kind of a question mark, because it seems like either end has pros and cons. We want to spin this around that way, but I think we're going to go ahead with this orientation. So let's go ahead and highlight our overhangs, and we've got the paint bucket turned on overhangs only. So we'll start here, we'll clip that, we'll hit that, we'll hit that. We do not need to hit these guys. We don't need to hit any of these. What we are going to want is we want supports on at least one or two of these surfaces here, so that everything prints correctly. Let's finish painting these. Turn this off, and we'll see. Get one of these surfaces here. I kind of like this inner one. This one might be, yeah, this one wants to go all the way around the edge. I don't want to do that, so we're going to do that right there. We're going to do that right there. Alright, let's see what we get. We don't need to support any of this up here. This should all be fine. This should print just fine, even though it seems like it's kind of overhanging quite a bit. It will build gradually. It doesn't have to go out very far. If it was going out farther, then yeah, we might run into trouble, but because it doesn't project out that far off the surface, we should be okay. Let's go ahead and slice this and see what we got. Okay, again, yeah, we have this really nice sort of 30, 60, 90 triangle thing here. It's probably not exactly that, but it's close. And that's going to give us some very, very good support for this forward and backward motion. And you know, you can do this with any layer height if you want to print this at 0.3, which I wouldn't recommend. That's going to be a lot of sanding. But you can also print it at lower resolutions like 0.15 or even 0.08. If you do print at 0.08, don't go full speed. I recommend going, if you go 30% and you got your settings dialed in for your material, you may not even see any layer lines. So the nice thing about it going slow and running at a relatively high temperature is that it's going to kind of smooth everything out. Everything's going to melt together a little better. Okay, so there's that guy. And that's just something I've observed from my own prints. Okay, this guy appears to be a very challenging piece. How would we print this? Well, because I am a kind and thoughtful model builder who also is a 3D printer and wants to make things as easy on myself as possible, I set this up to where this surface here and this surface here are at the same level. So if we select this and we go to this and click on that, now we are on the bed, and it is going to be very, very easy to do supports for this. So let's go ahead and go into the support mode and see what we got to do. Okay, so in theory, we might not need supports here, but I want to put some in anyway, because even though it is possible that we could bridge this, it's a very short distance, the potential for drooping is pretty high. So I'm going to reduce what it's saying we need to about right there, and we'll put some supports right in there. That's our first spot, and this thing's actually not going to need as many supports as we would normally expect. All the rest of these surfaces are actually very good transitional surfaces and have good angles in them. Even this here, which, you know, you'd think, oh, maybe we need supports along this, but because it is angling up and it's straight, it's not an arc, it should print just fine. Also, the other thing to note is that this is an area that's going to be completely hidden by the scales, so it does not have to be perfect. We actually do get a little bit of drooping in there. It's not really going to be a big deal at all. The surfaces that count are right here, obviously these, the sides, and these little flares that come out right here. And of course these grooves, we want these grooves to come out. This needs to be nice, and I think it's going to be just fine. So we'll go ahead and slice this. And what's great about this part is that we've got it aligned along the front and back motion. We've got it parallel to that motion, and so there's no danger of this thing toppling over. Also, there is a lot of mass up here, but it's very well supported by these pieces here. And we've also got this very nice long surface area making contact with the bed. So we'll go back here and we'll look at that, and it does look like I'm overhanging just a little bit, so we're going to come forward so I'm sure that we're not out in space there. We could also rotate this a little bit, like 45 degrees or something if we wanted to, but I don't think we need to. I think it's going to be just fine the way it is. So we'll go ahead and undo that, and we'll go ahead and slice it, see what we get. Okay, on this particular one, I think normally I would not want a raft on this surface here, but that particular surface is going to be completely hidden. I know that my raft settings are good and that this raft will release itself from the part fairly easily. It's going to really keep it on the bed nicely. This area is well supported. We do get some ringing and some banding in here, some stair stepping, but that was to be expected. We were going to get that. The only other way that you could print this, that you could get a better surface area, would be to split this thing in two and print each half. Now the only problem there is you're going to get a seam that you're going to have to fill in with, you know, some kind of filler, and then sand it and primer and everything, which, you know, either way, it's kind of a trade-off. So you could do it that way and lay the pieces on the sides, and then you wouldn't need any supports at all. You also wouldn't need a raft. Or you could do it this way, get it all in one piece, and just sand these surfaces that are, you know, that are visible. Like, you know, obviously you've got this stair stepping here. Another thing that could help would be to print this particular piece at a higher resolution. You could even do it at 0.018. And I think it would be pretty strong, but I think it's going to be strongest with a 0.2 millimeter layer height. Alright, so there is our four most challenging parts for the LL-99C blaster: the receiver, the barrel shroud, and the trigger guard. So there it is. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. I am HK7335. I say au revoir, which means thanks a million in Mandoa for purchasing my model, and happy building. I will see you in the next video. HK7335 out.